I have a lot to say about fatherhood. My voice is a little strained because I spent all day and all night last night doing active things, especially talking, celebrating, arguing, laughing at things on Twitter and other social media. It was quite the night after the shitstorm of Trump's Tulsa speech. But I have a lot to say and I wanted to get an early start today. First of all, happy Father's Day to all of my loyal Yizraelites who are fathers. I hope that you have a good relationship with your children. Today, I want to talk about someone who did not have a good relationship with his child, and that is my father. As many of you know, I'm intersex. What you might not know, my father was one of the unpleasant Christian extremists of Appalachia that you may have heard about. He wasn't a snake handler, but he was close. He believed in non-biblical extremes. He was not a good father. My mother had a malformed uterus, and like many of you know, she is from the Soviet era, and the drugs that her mother was subjected to altered her reproductive capability, and some say even altered her genetically. Now, I don't know what that caused in my mother exactly, but the doctors here in America told her that it would be foolish for her to try to have a child. She had a stunted small uterus and could never get pregnant, and if she did, on the off chance, it would likely end in having to terminate the pregnancy and could even cost her life as well. They got pregnant anyway with me. I came out, I was a little different. But my extraordinarily Orthodox Christian mother and my, let's be nice and call him a Baptist father, they didn't see that. They didn't want to hear that. They relied on God to fix their broken child. I was subjected to all manner of abuse from them. It didn't go well. I was subjected to things like faux exorcisms to cast out the quote-unquote evil girl demon that was poisoning their son. And it wasn't until I was in my late teens when I was actually able to get medical help and started learning I was intersex and why my genitalia looked different and why I started to develop like a girl in middle school when the other girls did instead of like a boy. I had a very turbulent, terrible, awful childhood, primarily because of the cruelties laid upon me by my terrible, abusive father. He would hit me, slap me, beat me. I was never sexually abused by him or anyone else, thankfully. But he would say such ugly things to me as, "You don't want to grow up wrong," or "Look at you, something has clearly gone wrong," often accompanied by grumbling or misappropriated prayers to some god before he would hit me or lock me in my room or tell me I had to wait in the darkness down in the basement before I could eat. He was the apex of authoritarian religious cruelty to me. However, for all of his terrible failings and all of the abuses laid upon me by this horrible man, he did not fail me in one way. He remained a father. He taught me to hunt, to fish, how to break down and reassemble firearms, how to load my own ammunition. He taught me how to drive a stick shift, how to drive a car before I was 10 years old. He taught me responsibility. He taught me about gardening. He taught me about how to survive in the wild. He taught me what it was to be a man. He taught me what it looked like to be a man. He taught my brain, gender confused and sex warped as it was. He taught me what a man was, what a man could be, what a man shouldn't be. He taught me these things. He was there. He didn't abandon me. As awful as the relationship was between my mother and father, he is not the one that ended that relationship. He never wanted that. He fought tooth and nail for that marriage to stay together. And even from my youngest memories, my mother left him when I was 4.5 or 5 years old. I was very young, but I remember him arguing over and over again loudly about how a child needs a mother and a father even if they don't get along. I remember him screaming that. He was an asshole, sure, but he wasn't wrong, was he? He wasn't wrong. So for all of his failings, he was still present, and he taught me, as confused and plagued with problems as I was as a youngster, he taught me what being a man was. He showed me. And through that, I was able to have, even though it was an example of a poor version, I at least knew what a man was and what a man could do. My mother, even though she left, was immediately replaced by another woman because my father thought that a child needed a mother. So in less than a year, he had someone lined up that he thought would work. Of course, since he was an authoritarian, abusive jerk, that didn't work out either. She left when I was around 12, and I ended up emancipating at 15 and going my own way. That's another story. However, through all of that ugliness, through all of the abuses he put me through, all the cruel words he said to me, all of his failings, I learned a very valuable lesson that men really, really want a wife and a family. That's a core value, it seems, to men. And he exemplified that. For all of his faults and all the troubles that he had, he showed me a passion, maybe even the passion, that drives men forward. And I'm thankful for that. So as much as I can hate him, as much as I can be glad that that awful man is dead, I am thankful. I'm thankful he didn't abandon me. I'm thankful he showed me what it was to be a man. I'm thankful that he was a father. He was a terrible father, but he was a father. That's important. I'm from a rural area, as you might have guessed, in the Appalachian Mountains. I gotta let my hair down for this. It's getting personal. I'm from a rural area in the Appalachian Mountains. As you might guess, it was very strange being an intersex weirdo growing up in a rural place like this, but I went to a university in the late 90s. I was very quickly co-opted by the LGBT activists and people who cared about the burgeoning progressivism on campuses. Fortunately, after just a few years, I started to break free of them and realize that they didn't care about me, they didn't care about really anyone other than their ideological pairings. And I'm not really transgender in the classical sense. I'm more of an intersex androgyne that just struggles with gender. So I didn't really drink their Kool-Aid, so to speak. The tranny Kool-Aid, while tasty, was not really one that I wanted to embrace. So thankfully, I didn't become part of them permanently. Why do I bring this up? Because this progressive experience led me to moving out west for a decade. I won't name the cities that I went to, but I went to some major cities on our west coast and in the southwest desert of America. Functional adults that I met, professors, other students, co-workers, people I would meet through social activities. So many of them were ungrounded. They had no sense of community or family or investment in these big cities. They would move every year, sometimes twice a year. Live in different places, never owned, always rented, because in these big cities, who can afford to buy the properties? A tiny, crappy house that's fallen apart in these places is at least $1 million. Who has that kind of money? I started talking to others in my mid-20s about these questions. Why don't you feel grounded here? Isn't this city great? Don't you love all the amenities that are here? The availability of great health care that can take care of weirdos like me that need specialist doctors to look at and to do genetics tests on and stuff? And they didn't care. The deeper I went into this social rabbit hole, the more I realized the absence of fathers. Not just fathers, but mothers too. Absence of what I would consider real parenting of any kind. They just didn't have good families. Many of them only had one parent. Some of them didn't have any parents. They grew up with grandparents or living at a cousin's house. It was white folks, black folks, native people. They all seemed, in these big cities, keep in mind, not rural areas, in these big cities, people across demographics, even white, seem to be demoralized, empty of family values, empty of community sense. Not everyone, but a notable difference between rural Appalachia, where I spent most of my youth. A huge night and day difference. Why? Well, I think it's because these big cities and leftist policies and feminism and progressivism, all of the myriad things that we talk about on my channel that lead to the decay of family values, the sex war between male and female, thanks feminism, that has made men and women view each other as some kind of resource war, it's complete and utter poison to our way of life, to our existence. And I think it's a failure of parenting. We send kids to public school as young as 4 years old now. Why is there Head Start and daycare? Because mommy and or daddy, they have to work. In this corporatist monopo state nightmare that we live in, almost no one in these cities can afford to just spend time with their kids, can take a few years off. Let the mother be the mother. Let the father be the father. Who can do that in these big cities unless you're rich? None of us. And that's if we're lucky enough to have two parents, let alone, what is it, I think the last time we looked, only 17% of blacks in big cities have father figures, and only like 38% of whites do. I think it's in between for Mexicans, but it's ridiculous. The decay of the family unit on top of the other ugliness of the monopo state, I think has created a spiritual decay that we can't fix in these big cities. Because going back 2 or 3 generations now, no one has any reason to be communally or spiritually invested in these cancerous boils of society. So that concludes my rant today about fatherhood and the value of parenting. I hope that you enjoyed my little rant and my personal information. I do my best not to talk about trans or intersex stuff much. I don't want to be pigeonholed as that. But it's an inescapable part of what I am. And in this particular case, when it comes to fatherhood, it's the key source of me, I believe, being the target of my unstable, abusive father's wrath. Let me know what you think about parenting, fatherhood specifically, in the comments down below. And please, I'm trying to grow this channel. Share this with people who don't already think like us. Share this with people on Facebook. Share this with people in your family or your friends group that might could use some supporting words from someone who's an experienced outsider. Help me grow. Let's get the truth to as many people as we can. So until next time, happy Father's Day.